You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game, and we will be doing politics this evening because we have as our guest State Representative Mark Beaubien, who's been a state representative for going on 12 years now, so he knows a lot about public policy. He also knows a fair amount about politics. He has been, I think it's safe to say, a lifelong Republican?
Yes.
A lifelong resident of Lake County, 23-year resident of Barrington. He lives in Barrington Hills now.
Correct.
His office is in R-Wauconda, and 12 Northwestern undergrad and then Northwestern Law School, about 20 years in private practice as a lawyer, and the last 10 or so in banking. He's had a history in family. Your family has been involved in banking. Right. He's been with the State Bank of Lake Zurich, with the Suburban Bank of Barrington. So he knows a lot about financial issues, I think it would be safe to say. He knows a lot about the law. And we're going to be talking about both, because anybody who knows state government knows that the law and finance is a lot of what state government is about. And look at the topics for this evening. Speaker Mike Madigan and Rod Blagojevich, mano a mano. It's like they're getting to hand-to-hand combat. Mm-hmm. People think that we're talking about what's going on in the state, the budget, the capital plan, but this is really like two men in the ring wrestling, right? Speaker Mike Madigan, Rod Blagojevich.
Exactly, and Speaker Madigan is also not talking to Tom Cross. He hasn't talked to him in months, although Tom has reached out to him.
Because he thinks that he was sold out and he went over on the governor's side, the dark side?
That's what the explanation is given. I don't know that to be the fact, but that appears to be the case.
Who knows with the speaker, right?
Yeah. So there's just no discussing going on. The speaker won't sit in the same room with the governor or Emil Jones, so they're sending intermediaries, which really is not very good government.
And the intermediary used to be Tom Cross, but now he's not talking. Speaker Mike's talking to Tom, so there's no intermediary.
Barbara Curry basically does the negotiation.
Surrogate.
Yes.
Barbara Flynn Curry, who I guess would be the House Majority Leader.
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about the income tax increase that some people say is on the horizon, that the Democrats are planning and plotting to do that in January of 2009. Talk also about whether Rod Blagojevich will be impeached, should be impeached. It's odd. It's not a word that's been in our lexicon a lot until the last 6 months or so.
A few years, actually, if you go back.
Well, maybe. It's been in the federal lexicon, not so much in state. State GOP still on life support. We'll find out from State Representative Mark Beaubien if there's any life left in the Republican Party, if there's a message, if there's a philosophy, if they'll be coming back. And Mark Beaubien, State Representative Mark Beaubien, knew Barack Obama for 8 years. Barack was in the state Senate. Representative Beaubien was in the State House. They've known each other, so we'll get some of the insights from somebody who knows him personally as well as professionally. Can Barack Obama fix the country? And if so, why couldn't he fix the state or the Illinois Democratic Party? More guns, less crime in Chicago. Find out about that, about the recent Supreme Court decision in Washington, D.C., overturning the ban on handguns in D.C. Does that have an impact in Chicago? More reform, less spending on education. Does that make sense? And looking ahead to the gubernatorial race in 2010, are we looking at a rematch between Joe Burkett and Lisa Madigan? So I think there are a few other Republicans and a few Democrats who might quibble with that they will be in there instead. Stay tuned, don't turn that dial, because the district for Mark Beaubien includes the 57th district, Barrington, Wauconda, Round Lake City, Ingleside, Island Lake, Fox Lake, Lakemore, Tower Lakes, Fox River Grove, McHenry, Crystal Lake, Holiday Hills, Wonder Lake, Woodstock, and other areas. But if you don't live in any of those areas, we're going to be talking about state issues that relate to you, wherever you are across the state of Illinois. We're taping the show on June 29th. It'll air in the suburbs, the Chicago metro suburbs, the week of June 30th, so wishing those folks a happy July 4th. It'll air in Chicago and Aurora and perhaps other areas downstate the week after, so we're wishing you a happy July 4th, post July 4th. I've asked this question before, but we've just talked the sort of the highbrow issues of taxes and spending, but does it really come down to this? State Representative Mark Beaubien, do Speaker Mike Madigan and Rod Blagojevich just hate each other, and Illinois government is on standstill until that dispute gets worked out, or one of them knocks the other out?
I don't necessarily like to use the word hatred. There's certainly a strong dislike, and they have not communicated for a couple of years, basically.
Imagine that. So the Speaker of the Illinois House and the Governor of the state of Illinois, you think, have not spoken to each other, communicated for a few years?
Well over a year. I'm hearing from the Governor's people and from Madigan's people. So I actually believe they have not been communicating. And Madigan does not communicate with Jones either, or with Tom Cross.
And Madigan doesn't with Jones because Jones is allied. Jones, of course, is Emil Jones, who's the Senate President, Democrat, and he is allied and has been at least for maybe since he became governor with Governor Rod Blagojevich. So in these disputes between Madigan and the governor, it's between Madigan and Jones and the governor, right? That's kind of a tag team match, at least up to the president.
The rumor is with Jones, there was an agreement the prior year that after the governor took out the reduction veto on or line item veto on the projects for the Democrats, Jones agreed to override it and didn't do it. Whether that's in fact what happened, that seems to be the word on the street that that's what occurred. That's why that rift is there. Rod and the governor really have never gotten along very well. I think it's a style thing. You know, who's on first?
Who and the governor?
Madigan and the governor. Who's on first? Who's on second? Who's the leader? Who isn't the leader?
Is it also because the daughter of Speaker Mike Madigan is Lisa Madigan? She's Attorney General, and people assume the Speaker would like to help her become governor at some point. So there's that rivalry.
Well, I don't think that has anything to do with it. I'm not sure it's an absolute bet that Lisa will run for governor. The rumor's out there, but I'm not sure she will. She has 2 young children. That option's there. It would be awkward for him to be, you know, leader of the Democratic Party and head of the House Democrats and having his daughter as governor. I think it might put him in a difficult position. And I don't think he's ready to step down. He's still a very vibrant, engaged individual.
I was surprised. I asked Lisa Madigan after a press conference this week whether she's thinking about it, and she said yes, thinking about running for governor. I thought she'd say, I don't want to even talk about that, Mr. Berkowitz. But she didn't.
It's an easy question to answer. Oh yeah, I'm thinking
about it. You think? Okay. I thought maybe that was showing.
Well, there's some rumor about the Supreme Court. You know, who knows?
Right, because that's a little more comfortable if you got 2 young kids. You don't have to go to Washington and all that.
A governorship should be a 24/7 job. You need to put an awful lot of time in, an awful lot of travel. You have to go all over the state. As Attorney General, obviously Supreme Court judge, you can spend a lot of time at home and work out of your home. I guess that's what we have now, actually. But they should be down in Springfield, and they should be actively participating. And there's an awful lot of travel and speaking. And you know, I just don't know if she did or not. I know Lisa. I like her. She's a very capable individual.
Well, let's go to that. We're going to go to the end of the show, but let's start with that. There are a bunch of names that are thrown out. Let's play analyst here. We'll get to the Republicans in a minute, but as I say, usually around in Illinois, the Democrats are more fun to talk about, so we'll get to the Republicans.
Okay.
Not that you're fun. Not that you're not fun, State Representative Beaubien, but okay, the names that are thrown out for potential gubernatorial candidates for 2010 in the Democratic primary would be Lisa Madigan. Rod Blagojevich, of course, may run again. Bill Daley, brother of Mayor Richard M. Daley, may be sort of back in town. He was out of town for a bit. Alexei Janulis, the state treasurer, a bit on the young side, but people are talking him up. Pat Quinn, who's currently the lieutenant governor, who's another guy who doesn't talk to the governor much except when they run for re-election and run for election. So once every 4 years, those 2 guys have a conversation. Paul Vallis, former CEO of the Chicago Public Schools, came in a close second in the Democratic primary in 2002 to Rod Blagojevich. Now has been recently fixing up the schools in Philadelphia, but then also doing it most recently in New Orleans, doing it fairly successfully. And Dan Hahn, state comptroller. So what do we got? 7 possible candidates running in the Democratic primary for governor. Did I forget anybody?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, so if you had to pick one, who's
I wouldn't go there.
Not to who you would prefer, but if you were making a prediction, who do you think is the odds-on favorite to be the Democratic candidate for governor in 2010?
Well, I think if Lisa Madigan wanted to run, she'd probably have the best shot at it.
She'd be the favorite over Rod Blagojevich.
I don't think Rod's going to run, but I don't know that. We don't communicate either.
No.
I mean,
because
not because I don't want to. He just doesn't.
Because he might be indicted, and that might be unseemly.
I don't want to go there either. But
you don't want to say he might be
I
indicted. You're not going to predict he would be indicted.
I'm not going to make that prediction. No, that's not my job. Bill Daley, I really don't know much about. Alexei, I've worked with extensively. I'm on one of his committees. He's a very outstanding individual, very articulate.
Is he 30 years old yet?
I don't know. I never asked him.
I thought he was 29 or 30 when he was running, so I guess
he's a very, very impressive individual. Pat Quinn, I think, is a little bit too strident for me. Paul Vallis, I've often thought if he'd have won, how the state would have been different. I think he's a very capable individual, and so is Dan Hines.
So that's your assessment, but you're not going to pick one that you think.
Well, I think if Lisa wanted to run,
she's the favorite.
She'd get it. I think maybe Paul Vallis or Alexei if he chooses to run. He's still young. He could stick around a while and run later.
So, well, let's go over the Democrats. I don't know. There are a bunch of names. Let me just rattle them off.
These are Republicans.
That's, excuse me, yeah. My assistant here, Representative Beaubien, is going to keep me straight when I go off the straight and narrow. So the the potential candidates in the Republican primary for 2010, Bill Brady's all but declared himself. Senator Bill Brady, state senator from Bloomington. He ran in the Republican primary, respectable showing in 2006, got about 20% of the vote. Joe Burkett ran for Attorney General in, what was that? That would be in 2002.
2002, yes.
Right, so ran against Lisa Madigan, so that's why we say it could be a rematch if he gets the nomination against Lisa Madigan. He is, of course, still the state's attorney in DuPage County. Dan Rutherford, another state senator who ran for Secretary of State in 2002, could be a candidate. Downstate state senator. Bob Schillerstrom, chairman of the board for DuPage County, right?
Correct. And
he could be running. Ron Gidwitz ran for governor in 2002 in the Republican primary, respectable showing, about 10%. John Shimkus, downstate governor, his name come up from time to time. Tom Cross, the leader of the State House, we've been talking about Tom. Christine Radogno, state senator. And of course, and Christine ran for state treasurer, and actually a good race against Alexei Giannoulias in 2006, a close race. Probably was the best performing Republican statewide. I think it was 54-46. If she had had a few $1 million more, she might have been up there, right?
Yeah, well, yes, she probably would have done better.
If she had a family in banking like Alexei Giannoulias did, where you could sort of print your own money. Well, I'm just kidding. He doesn't really print his own money, but it helps. You would know being in banking. If you got a lot of banking friends, people like that are around money, right?
Unfortunately, in politics, money is becoming more and more of a force, and I think that's regrettable, but it's becoming more and more of a reality. You really need to have money to get out there. It doesn't always work. There's many examples nationwide where people have run and spent a lot of money and haven't gotten their offices. So
it doesn't always work, but it's almost becoming a necessary but not sufficient condition that you either have a lot of money that you can give to yourself or you have the ability to raise money. People forget this, but I saw this reference. I thought it was the case, and I saw it just in preparation for this show. Barack Obama, it said, raised $5 to $6 million in the Democratic primary in 2004. It's an incredible amount of money,
yes,
right?
It is.
And a lot of it, he was fortunate, but he was fortunate to raise it because he was fortunate that he had an opponent, Blair Hull, who was very wealthy himself. I think when Blair was on this set, I think we put the estimate of his net worth at about $350 million.
That helps.
That's a fair amount of change. But because he was giving him so much to himself, which was about 30 million or more, maybe it was 39 million, the millionaire, and it was a U.S. federal election, the millionaires, what was it, the millionaire's provision clicked in that would, if you give over $1 million or something like that, you raise the fees, you raise the contributions that your opponent can receive to $12,000. And that was the case for Barack Obama. Because of Blair Hull, Barack could go out collecting not $2,300, which is the limit now, $12,000. And this same article that I was reading about said that he'd collected about 30% of his funds of those, I think it was something like 1.7 million of those $12,000 chunks.
It worked.
My point is, it worked. He went on, obviously won the Democratic primary, which was his toughest race, an easy general election win. Now he's running for president of the United States. Query, if Barack Obama didn't have that ability to raise $5 or $6 million, would he have any chance at all of being a presidential candidate today? That is, if he couldn't have raised that money in the Democratic primary, he wouldn't have won. he wouldn't have been the Democratic candidate, he wouldn't have been a U.S. Senator, and we're talking about Hillary Clinton as being the nominee for the Democratic Party today.
Well, we're talking about money in politics, and as I've indicated, it's unfortunate it's playing a much greater role, and I'm sure it played a substantial role in Brock getting where he did. He's a phenomenal fundraiser.
And why is that? What does it take? You have to be charming?
He's a personality.
He's a charmer.
Yeah, as I said, you've said before, I do know him and served with him for years. I'm an outstanding individual. Very articulate, great presence, and people like him, and they want to give him money.
Yeah, and so, get back to the Republicans in a second, but you know Barack.
Right.
An honest guy?
Yes.
Can you explain away Reverend Wright, Father Pfleger, Tony Rezko, the bitter comment, all of that negative stuff that came up in the last 2 months, 3 months prior to his nomination for president in the Democratic primary?
I think the Pfleger-Wright thing's a little bit unfair. I mean, he was a member of the church. I've had some experience in black churches, and they have a rhetoric and a style that, well, some people might find offensive, but he was a member there, and I don't think Wright should have attacked him. I can't explain Rezko. It was a mistake.
Bad judgment to get associated with him?
Yes. But I don't know how much he knew about it. I mean, he claims
well, but everybody knew that Rezko was a mover and shaker, right?
Oh, yes.
I don't know how much he knew, but I mean, Gary McDougal, the former chairman of the Republican Party. You know Gary?
Yes.
Well, I said something on this set a year or two back. Well, everybody, you know, had some involvement with Tony Rezko, Democrat and Republican. Gary said, I didn't.
Well,
McDougal didn't, because he knew he's not the kind of guy you could get involved with.
Well, it was probably a bad judgment. He's spoken up on it, and I think it's behind it.
But he also gave the impression early on that he'd worked at a law firm that did, and he as an associate did 5 hours of work for the Rezko, who was a client of that law firm, and so forth. But the truth which came out is no, over 8 or 9 years as a state Senate candidate, as a U.S. Senate candidate, Rezko had raised for Obama, or given, $250,000 to him, to his campaigns. And when he was running for the U.S. Senate, it came out, Barack would admit this, there were times in which Obama and Rezko were speaking almost daily about the campaign. He wasn't a casual acquaintance, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right.
So, reassess, reevaluate, and more concerned about Barack Obama?
I would be a little more concerned. Assuming your facts are correct, I'd be a little more concerned, because I think you learn early on some people you don't want to associate with, whether they be legislators or lobbyists or people within the community. You just don't want to be associated with them for one reason or another.
But for your 8 years with him and Barack Obama in the General Assembly, dealing with him on various things, observing him, your 8 years with him, I know you're a Republican, but putting that aside, would you be comfortable with Barack Obama as President of the United States?
Yes.
Because?
I think he's an outstanding individual. I think the office of presidency has its own confines. You talk about the rhetoric in the campaign, what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. But once you get into the congressional setting, there's certain limits to what you can actually accomplish or not accomplish. So I think the people who are concerned that he's going to be way out on the left side, there's constraints that hold you back in. And you can talk about things, but not everything can actually be done. The key is, and I call it a Kennedy concept, you've got to surround yourself with good people, and that will be the test of his presidency. If you can get good people around him, he'll be a good president, and that's the key.
Now, you are a Republican. John McCain, of course, is the presumptive nominee in the Republican Party for President of the United States. Between McCain and Obama, you got a preference?
I like McCain. I like his experience. I've met him. I wouldn't say I know him. I've met him on a couple of occasions. Very, very forthright, very presentable. The thing with McCain is, and I don't agree with all his positions. We differ on some things. But out of 8 or 9 or 10 things, I probably agree on 7, but I know what they are. I know what I'm buying into. With Barack, I don't think anybody's quite sure what he's going to do. He's kind of here and there, which you have to do during a presidential election. You start on the left and you got to go back to the middle. It's just part of the process. But what is he actually going to do is the key, and McCain will tell you exactly what he's going to do.
So right now, who are you supporting for President of the United States?
John McCain.
Okay. Is it mostly because you are a Republican, have been a lifelong Republican, or do you think if you were an independent and had gone both ways, do you think you'd still be supporting McCain?
I would say, based on my background, my father's time in the service, et cetera, that I would probably go with someone with a strong military background. That would just be my natural inclination.
And John McCain's the person, almost a quarter of a century in the military, almost a quarter of a century in the Congress, right?
Correct.
Almost 2 separate military careers.
Yes.
Actually, almost 2 separate professional careers.
Yeah, professional. Yeah.
One military, one congressional.
Right.
But as John McCain would say, he's older than dirt, and more
I
scars
don't-
than Frankenstein. That's the phrasing that McCain used to describe himself.
Yeah.
You don't think that's relevant?
No, as long as he's in good health. I know many people in their 70s, even in their 80s, are just very actively involved. They still have all their faculties together, and I'm not concerned about the age issue.
Let's go back to the state issues. Republican primary 2010, we mentioned Joe Burkett, we mentioned Bill Brady, Dan Rutherford, Bob Schillerstrom, Ron Goodwitz, John Shimskis, Tom Cross, the Illinois House Leader, Christine Radogno, the state senator, possibly Judy Ward-Topinka, who ran in 2006.
I don't think so.
All right, but without Judy, you got 8 other candidates. Who do you like? Who do you prefer?
Well,
but who do you think is most likely to be the Republican candidate for governor?
It depends of those which ones actually run.
Assuming they all were somehow.
Well, my preference would be Tom Cross, but I don't think he's seriously contemplating running for governor. I do live with him, so.
So of the ones who you think might run,
Springfield.
who do you think is likely to get that nomination?
Rutherford's an extremely hard worker and has tentacles throughout the entire state. I don't know Schillerstrom that well. I sat next to Bill Brady for 4 years. I think he'd do a good job. I think he and Joe have the sort of the noose of being a little bit far right of the general public in the state of Illinois. I think they do well in their own areas, but when they get into the metropolitan areas in the city, they're just a little bit too extreme. But they'd both be fine candidates.
So who do you think emerges?
I'd say of that group, I would think that Christine probably would. If Tom doesn't run, I would think Christine would. She's very presentable. I work with her on the budget. She's the Senate Republican negotiator. She knows state government. She's high energy.
That'd be interesting. We'd have 2 female candidates for governor in 2010. Lisa Madigan running against
that'd be great. We'll
Attorney
first
General
woman
Madigan
governor.
running
That'd be
against
super.
State Senator Christine Radogno. All right, we'll let them know right after we finish the show that those are the 2 candidates, and they'll be right here on the set of Public Affairs to discuss that election. So let's go back to the nub of what's going on right now. We're taping this on June 30th. The governor has said what he's going to, by July 9th, if there's not additional revenue forthcoming from the General Assembly for the budget they passed, he's going to do what?
He has 3 options. First of all, they're not even delivering the 4 budget documents to him to June 30th. Now, why Emil Jones is doing that, I don't know. I think he controls 2 or 3 of them. He could send those over. The bills actually do exist. The governor has copies of what the bills are, so I'm sure they're working on them and making their analysis and so forth. Come the 9th, or immediately after July, he has 3 options. He can totally veto it, which leaves us no budget. He can line item veto it, which means he goes through there and says, I'm just totally going to eliminate this program, I'm going to totally eliminate that program. Or he can have what they call a reduction veto and say, I don't think $3 million is what they should get, I'm only going to give them 2. If he does that, this General Assembly then has 15 days to act after it goes back into session. And of course, that's the big question.
Will they go back into session? All right, so what's your guess? What do you think he does? Does he do this reduction veto, do you think?
I think so.
Okay. And then what's your guess? What does the General Assembly do? Do they wait until?
I think they'd wait.
They don't come back until after the election?
The next scheduled meeting is November 12th.
Right. After the election.
Veto session, correct, after the election. What we're hearing, and again, I'm not talking to Mike Madigan about this or Emil Jones, is that neither one of them really wants to go back. And I know their members don't.
All right, so they don't go back, let's say, until November 12th.
Right.
And what do they do? Do they pass a tax increase or do that in January maybe? Or do they pass it in the lame duck session, pass an income tax increase?
Again, this is a theory that's out there. Again, I don't know what the discussion is that Madigan wants to get 71 votes so he can control a potential tax increase. He hasn't said that. He's kind of hinted at it at times.
He's almost said it directly that he thinks we ought to raise taxes.
He doesn't have the votes during this year's session because he still only has, I think, 67 members. I don't think he can get all of them to vote for a tax
John
increase.
Cullerton said they're going to pick up 5. They're going to pick up some downstate Republicans like Roger Eddy and Jerry Mitchell.
I can't speak for Jerry Mitchell or Roger Eddy at the end of the day whether they'll be supportive of it or not. I think a lot of it depends on what the package is.
All right, so we don't know what happens, but you, Mark Beaubien, would you support an increase in the income tax?
No.
Okay. The Republican Party in this whole thing, let's go to that. Do they have a message? Do they have a philosophy? Let's start with the State House. you, Tom Cross, and others in the State House. Is your message no new taxes?
That's correct.
And is that coming out of the Republican caucus in the Senate as well with Frank Watson? No new taxes?
I can't speak for Frank, but knowing Frank, I'd say yes. That's.
Do you think the Republicans hang tough pretty much? Then maybe they lose one or two, but pretty much you folks hang tough, don't support any increase in income tax or the sales tax?
That's correct.
And no big increase in taxes in general?
Correct.
Okay. Is that the message, or is that just something you and I are talking about on this television show?
It's the message. We've had numerous meetings and discussions with leadership and the membership, and again, I want to emphasize that Tom Cross does not direct members how to vote. We discuss things, we take strong positions on things. We've had leaders not follow votes that they're normally supposed to follow. We don't criticize or hurt anyone if they don't vote along the party line, because we don't take those positions. As a practical matter, I think most Republicans would be opposed. In fact, Republicans are opposed to a tax increase. Whether you can pick one or two of them off, I think it would depend upon what you're going to do with the money. I mean, you'd have educators say, I'm going to go for a tax increase and not see some of that money flow into education. They may not be as inclined to support that.
Capital plan, the $34 billion, now it's a $34 billion capital plan. Is that going to pass at all?
No, not this year.
Because? Because the state doesn't need capital projects?
People
or because
need to listen to what Mike Madigan says. He said, I do not support gambling for bonding. And frankly, I think it's a very questionable source myself. I don't think they're going to raise the kind of revenue I think they're going to raise. He's not necessarily against changing the gambling laws. I don't believe. I can't speak for Mike Madigan.
But what are you going to do to get a revenue source for that? You'd need to lease the lottery. You'd need to do the pension bond sale that the governor wants to do. Are there any revenue sources that you or other Republicans support in large part for a capital plan, to finance a capital plan?
I see nothing on the table that I could currently support, although, again, I'm speaking for myself.
Right.
As far as Tom Cross and the caucus is concerned, he has told the governor and others, and I guess our leadership position is we're willing to listen to anything. But as often is the case with this administration, there's nothing specific out there. There's not a bill.
Okay, so
that really makes sense. There is a bill.
There's nothing that you like.
There's
nothing that you like, or that you know Tom Cross likes on the capital plan.
Well, I worked on the sort of super secret group that started the whole discussion of the sale of the pension bonds. In the ideal world, it'll work. I mean, if you get a low enough interest rate and then ease your way into a higher rate of return, there's money to be made there. There's not an absolute guarantee. We've been lucky in the first.
So you might buy into the pension bond sale that the governor's
when we see what specifically was there. I think what the Senate Democrats' position has been in the budget hearings, we'll look at anything, but we're still going to fully fund the pensions. The governor wants to have the bonds and then cut back.
We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll. It's gone fast, but I very much want to thank our guest, State Representative Mark Beaubien.
Thank you.
Hope you'll come back soon.
Will do.
A lot of topics we haven't finished, we haven't covered, but thanks so much for coming out. He is a state representative. He is in his 12th year in the General Assembly, in the State House. He may or may not have an opponent. We'll find out whether he has an opponent in the general election in the next few weeks. There's a challenge to his current opponent. Impeachment. Will Rod Blagojevich be impeached?
I do not believe so as things currently stand.
Will articles of impeachment issue from the State House?
It's my own personal guess. The answer is no.
You know the story. There was testimony from R-Wauconda that he sat down with Tony Rezko, with Governor Rod Blagojevich, three of them in a room, $25,000 check put on the table by Tony Rezko saying, this guy gave us $25,000, and the government said, do we get a job for him? That's the testimony. I'm approximating it. Okay, that's the testimony in the Rezko trial. If that happened, is that an indictable offense? You're a lawyer.
Yeah,
Northwestern
well, I'm
Law
not
School.
an impeachment lawyer. I do not believe that in and of itself would be enough. I'm one of these people that very strongly believe that there's accusations out there until they're proven.
Okay.
I don't like to
If
make.
that accusation were proven, would that be an indictable offense?
If the jury came in and said this is what happened,
then it's indictable and it's convictable. You could say it would be a felony, right?
Yes, I think they've got.
And would that be an impeachable offense before or after the conviction?
I would think afterwards, but again, we don't control.